I had to do this video. I had to do this video. How you doing, guys? My name is Wayne. I'm 67 years old. Been training probably since I was 15. When I was a kid, all we had were muscle magazines, and they were all full of shit. So I decided to go to college and get educated. I went to Montclair State University in New Jersey. I studied nutrition. While I was there, I studied exercise physiology. Then I moved to Florida. I studied from NSCA, ACE, and ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine. And I got certified. So now there's YouTube. And I'm watching YouTube. 90% of it is bullshit, right? Even the educated guys, which we'll get into, are saying and doing things wrong. And the guy like you, a natural bodybuilder, are watching this stuff, and you know you're either going to wind up hurting yourself, or you're just going to spin your wheels and not get anywhere. So my goal today is to teach you what's important and what's not important to build muscle. I want you to be able to separate the truth from the bullshit. Let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is the eccentric contraction building muscle. It does not. Here's why. This is a diagram of the myofibril, which is the smallest part of the muscle fiber. On each end, you have Z lines. In the middle, you have a thick filament called myosin. Above it, you have a thin filament called actin. Now, in a contracted state like this is, the actin came together over the myosin filament. Now, how that happens is the myosin releases something called cross bridges. And these cross bridges attach themselves to the actin, and they pull the actin together, and they pull the Z lines together. That pulling effect is what will thicken the myofibril. Pulling. Now, this is what happens when you're releasing eccentric contraction. The Z lines come apart, the actin came apart, and like 95% of those cross bridges are gone. They release themselves from the actin. They just let go. This letting go effect is not a condition for building, not at all. First of all, when you do a contraction, you are opposing gravity. When you do eccentric contraction, you're resisting gravity. Resisting with everything letting go is not a condition for building, so don't believe it. Now, eccentric contraction is important. Number one, it adds to the overall work done by the muscle. Okay, if you bring it up and just drop it, that's half the work done. It protects you. If you're doing heavy bench press, the last thing you want to do is drop it on your chest, right? It's common sense. But it will not build directly. What does build? Speed builds. Speed of reps, speed of between sets, and workout speed. Speed of reps. Two guys go into a gym. They're both going to do 10 reps on curls. One guy gets 10 reps done in 15 seconds, right? Another guy gets 10 reps done in 30 seconds, maybe longer, 40 seconds, right? The guy that did the 10 reps, the same amount of reps as the other guy, but he did in half the time. Whenever you shorten the rest and do the same amount of work, it's higher intensity. Let's apply that to something else. If you're going to run 50 yards and it takes you 30 seconds, right? And then you run that same 50 yards in 10 seconds. You did the same amount of work, covered the same distance in a shorter period of time. You condensed it. When you condense something, it's harder. You can apply that to anything. That's the way it's done. Now, that doesn't mean that you're supposed to go as fast as you can. You must control the weight, but you must keep the reps together. That's called isotonic movement. Isotonic is a Greek word which means same or equal tension, which means you got to keep the reps the same speed also, because if you speed it up on one and then slow on the other, you're changing the tension. You got to keep the tension the same, keep it constant, and keep the reps together. Because exercise science teaches us there are 4 ways to increase intensity. Raise the weight, change the angle, shorten the rest, and eliminate the pause between the reps. No pausing, no slowing down, constant tension. Let's move on. Set speed, we're going to cover over here. Workout speed. If you do 3 sets of bench press with a minute rest, now you're going to do some inclines. You got to take a minute rest between the bench press and the inclines. Why? Because of fatigue level. It's all about keeping the fatigue level up. That's what keeping reps together is all about, raising the fatigue level. Now, let's talk about full range of motion. Nothing bothers me more than seeing a guy do half reps on bench press. Halfway up. I've seen guys go halfway down. That's a waste of time. That's called a partial flexion. You always have to use full range of motion. Why? Because the greater the distance of travel, the more work that is done. And the greater volume also, which equals more growth. Think about it. If you did 10 sets of something, and you only went halfway up, aren't you increasing the volume of work if you go all the way up on all those 10 sets? Of course you are. Just common sense. You want to do full range of motion to get the most out of your reps. Here's one more thing I want to add about reps. Too many people concentrate on getting the next rep before they complete the rep they're on. Concentrate on the rep you're on. Make sure you go all the way up and down before you start the next rep. When you start to get tired on curls, most people will go up to here, then they'll go down and try and get another rep. Go all the way up, struggle to get that rep all the way up. Bring those Z lines together. Bring them together. It's very important. Okay, let's talk about fiber rotation. You probably never heard of it. It's a fancy word for keeping the level of intensity, the fatigue level up. Here, you're going to do bench press. Here's 1 rep, here's 10 reps. On the first rep, you're going to fatigue surface fibers. The second rep, you're going to go a little deeper into the muscle and create a fatigue of those fibers, because you can't use the first fibers you fatigue. They're done. Then the 3rd rep, you go deeper. 4th rep, you go deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to the 9th rep. Let's say you're going to do 9 reps. You barely get the 9th rep up, right? How many times have you seen people hold that weight up and go, and just hold it up there and then go for a 10th rep and they get it and they think they did themselves good, but they didn't. Because when they did their 9th rep, the fibers that they fatigued here cooled while they were holding that weight up. And then when they do their 10th rep, they're actually using the fibers they used on the 9th rep again. Fatigue level drops immediately. It's buffered by bicarbonate. So you always want to keep your reps going to reach the highest level of fatigue. Now, let's talk about crossing the threshold of irritability. Here's 3 sets of curls. Here's your first set. 1 rep, you're doing 10 reps. You put the weight down. As soon as you put it down, bicarbonate starts to do its job. Your fatigue level starts to drop. Then you do your second set. Maybe you took 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. You do your second set. Goes up here. You rack the weight. Now you're talking to some guy, right? Another 2-3 minutes go by. You do another set. It goes up. You rack it. The fatigue level drops. Look at the peaks. The peaks are no higher on the 3rd set as they were the 2nd, or the 2nd as they were on the 1st. This is what it should look like. Your set 1, here's your peak. You do a short rest. It goes up and crosses the threshold. Cross the threshold of irritability. That's the fundamental principle for building muscle. That and heavy weight. Extremely important. Those are the only 2 things you got to worry about, really. So crossing the threshold of irritability. Let's talk about form. there are things called planes. You have a sagittal plane, which divides the right side and the left side of your body. You have a horizontal plane, which separates the top from the bottom of your body. And you have a frontal plane, which divides the front to the back of your body. Now let's take a set of curls. Imagine the sagittal plane a sheet of glass. Move that sheet of glass over to where your arm is. Now when you do your curls, you have to stay right in that plane of motion. How about the guys that go out with their arms like this? Because the weight's so heavy. They're outside the plane. Ruins the joints, takes the focus off the muscle. You must stay in the plane of motion. And you must remain stable. You can't float your arms back and forth. That kills the focus on the muscle. And constant tension. Always use constant tension. Okay. Let's talk about enhanced bodybuilders. My favorite part of this video, by the way. They have a lot of advantages over a natural guy. Recuperation is probably the biggest. They can train with more intensity, more frequency, and longer duration. They are different. Let me tell you something. I've seen guys go in the gym, beat the hell out of themselves for 2 hours. Then they come back in the evening and beat the hell out of themselves for 2 hours. They recuperated from that beating in the morning, and they're ready for a night workout. A natural guy can never do that. He will crash and burn. He will overtrain. Anytime you listen to what steroid bodybuilders do and you try to duplicate it, you're going to overtrain. You're going against what you can handle, against your level of fitness. You always have to coax your body, not force it. Now, let me tell you something about enhanced bodybuilders. The ones that are on steroids, they have something called higher nitrogen retention. Out of the 3 food elements, carbohydrate, fat, and protein, only protein has nitrogen, which is responsible. It's the element responsible for tissue resynthesis. Now, the problem with protein is the nitrogen doesn't stay on our system very long. It's in and it's out. But steroid bodybuilders don't have that problem, you see. It stays in longer. And the longer it stays, the growth potential's unbelievable, right? And they recuperate super fast. Now, carbohydrates and fats are extremely important for a natural bodybuilder. Why? Because carbohydrates, number one, they spare the protein. You never want to use protein as an energy. As long as you got enough carbohydrate and fat to work out, your protein will be left alone. The only ones that really ever use protein, the only athletes are maybe long distance runners that have been running for hours during a marathon, and they deplete their glycogen stores, which is carbohydrates stored in the muscle and liver, and then they start to dip into the protein source, right? That's called gluconeogenesis. What happens is the protein is used as an energy and the amino acids are stripped out of it, deaminized, and excreted through the urine. Now what do you have? You got protein that you're using for energy and you have no protein. That is a nightmare for bodybuilders. I mean, natural bodybuilders. These guys don't have a problem because they got their high nitrogen retention. They could get by, right? By going on 0 carbohydrates. Like Greg Doucette says, a 0 carbohydrates. Natural bodybuilder will crash and burn. Don't ever try it, guys. It's not worth it. It's not going to work. Carbohydrates store water in the muscle. Our bodies are 65, maybe 70% water. Muscles are water. For every 1 gram of carbohydrate, you're going to store 2.7 grams of water, which is very, very good for a natural bodybuilder. It's a nightmare for steroid bodybuilders. Why? Because steroids store water. So if they have a high carbohydrate diet and steroids, they're going to bloat. They're going to store too much water. That's why they can go on 0 carbohydrates and shred and shred and shred without losing strength, without losing muscle. And they can do multiple sets, right? They may get a little tired, but nothing like us. Forget it. We'll be out for weeks, right? You must have carbohydrates and fats. Please don't listen to what they're telling you on zero carbohydrates and all that. It's garbage. It's all garbage. Now, I have nothing against anybody that does steroids. What I do have is a problem with guys that are on steroids and trying to make you believe that they're not. They try to make you believe that they're smarter than the next guy, or they train harder than the next guy, or they know the secret. And as long as they make a natural bodybuilder believe that, because we all want to look like them, he will suck the money right out of that guy or girl and just keep training him and suck that money out until the guy's out of money or he's out of body because he overtrained, right? Now, I have no problem with guys on steroids. Look, it gave us Arnold in all the great movies. It gave us Stallone in the great movies. I mean, I don't care. I don't give a fat rat's ass what anybody puts in their body. However, there are big consequences. Take a look at Ronnie Coleman. Poor guy is completely messed up. In the interview, they asked him, Ronnie, could you do it without the steroids? He says, no way. It's impossible. Absolutely impossible. And then there's Lance Armstrong. When he got busted, they interviewed him. They asked him the same question. Can you have won all those events without the steroids? He says, absolutely not. It's humanly impossible. What does that tell you? That tells me that the muscle that Ronnie built was not real. The muscle that any of these steroid bodybuilders build is not real. If it was real, they wouldn't need the steroids. So, as a natural bodybuilder, that's what we see. A lot of steroid guys, you know, and you just have to remember that. It's not real. So my advice is do the best you can, be the best you can as a natural bodybuilder. Now, let's talk about overtraining. There are a bunch of side effects to overtraining. You got elevated resting heart rate, sleep disturbances, elevated blood pressure. The adrenal glands remain engaged and flood your body with a catabolic hormone called cortisol. Catecholamines also get released, but not from the adrenal glands. They're all catabolic hormones. They will tear your body down. And once again, you will crash and burn. These guys don't have that problem. However, you have to stay within your level of fitness. Your body will let you know when it's time to add weight. Your body will let you know when it's time to shorten the rest, when it's time to add more sets. Your body will do it. You got to coax your body. You're not going to force it to do anything. You force it, it's going to shut you down. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the best indicator of overtraining is resting heart rate. When I'm cranking out in the gym and I feel really tired the next day, I'll slap a heart rate monitor on, which is a strap and a watch, and I'll lay down for maybe 10 minutes. Now I know at rest, when I'm completely rested, my resting heart rate is about 45. If I lay down for 10 minutes and my resting heart rate's 51, 52, 53, I know that I'm stressing my body out. I'll do one or two things. I'll go into the gym and do a very easy light workout so my body will come down. Or I'll take the day off. Or two, whatever it takes for me to get back down to 45. That's the way you have to do it. Stay within your level of fitness. Let's talk about rep range. Rep range, 6 to 12 reps for hypertrophy with a 60 to 90 second rest. Sets 3 to 6 for beginners and intermediate. Now I'm talking about 6 to 12 reps, repetition maximum. I do believe in going to failure every set. There's clinical proof that that's much more effective than not going to failure every set. However, that depends on your rest period also. Now, exercise science tells us for one joint movement, like curls, one joint, elbow joint. Lateral raises, one joint, shoulder joint. You can rest 60 seconds. For two joint, like bench press, press behind the neck squats, you can rest 90 seconds. Now, That's only a guideline. As you get better, you'll be able to shorten that rest a little bit. The 60-second may go to 50 seconds for one joint movement. Then maybe 40 seconds. The biggest and best I've ever looked, I did a 30-second rest with 6 to 8 reps. 6 to 8 reps, highest tension you can get. 30-second rest, highest fatigue level you can get. Remember, it's all about the tension fatigue principle. High fatigue and high tension, because those two work together to build muscle. Now, sets 3 to 6. If you're going to failure really hard as a beginner and intermediate, okay, 6 sets is all you really need. Now, as you become more advanced, you can use compound sets or supersets, okay, to keep the fatigue level up and to raise it as high as possible. That's the key. Don't be like some of these guys I see doing 10, 12 sets per body part, you know. Greg Doucette does 10 to 12 sets per body part. And he trains 7 days a week, you know, sometimes, according to his video. I'm going to get into some of the things that Greg says in a minute. But anyway, that completes the rep range over training. Let's get into some of these guys I see on YouTube. Okay, Greg Doucette, October 30, 2019. It says get no prize for being natural. Well, you know what? If this was the 1950s, 1960s, I'd say yeah, because we thought everyone was natural. We didn't know anything about drugs. We never even heard of them. The first Mr. Olympia, Larry Scott, he was on drugs. And there's Harold Poole, he was on drugs. But this is today. We all know about steroids. We know these guys are on steroids. We know that the greatest athletes, a lot of them are on steroids. If you took all the steroids out of football, you know what you'd end up with? A 1970s football team. The biggest guy on the line is probably 230. Boring. Today we got 300-pounders running off the line as fast as the wide receivers did back in the 70s. It gave us great sports, right? However, the guy that stays natural, and we all want to look like those steroid bodybuilders, I give him all the credit in the world. Okay. Greg also says steroids aren't magic. Well, they are. I proved to you the nitrogen retention. In one of his videos, he says, well, it might have been the one in this year, October 30, 2019, where he says, it gave me a little strength, a little bit of muscle, you know what I mean? But a year before that, in the interview with Dave Palumbo says, well, how soon did you start getting results? He goes, oh, immediately, because I was gaining a pound of muscle a week. My strength was going up every week. It was incredible. So it is magic, guys. Okay, he says, high reps are like doing cardio. Are you freaking kidding me? Let me tell you something. This is how you increase cardiac output. First of all, you have cardiac output. You have muscular endurance. Okay, those are two different things now. Okay, cardiac output. First thing that you need is an increase in tidal volume. That means the amount of air that you breathe in. Now, air is 23% oxygen. That means you're breathing in more oxygen. That's what training aerobically does. Second thing, the alveoli in your lungs increase, right? They increase in number. That means the more air you breathe in, the more alveoli are there to cling on to the oxygen. The hemoglobin in the blood increases also. So when your left ventricle pushes that blood through the lungs, and it separates upper extremity and lower extremity, all that hemoglobin grabbed onto all that oxygen and is transporting it to all the mitochondria cells that increase in number and in size. So they're saying, come on, send down all the oxygen that you have. We'll handle it, right? That's how you increase cardiac output. That's how you increase your endurance. If you think you're going to do 50 reps, or 100 reps of curls and increase your endurance, you're sadly mistaken. But that's what he says. Okay, heavyweight is not a builder. Let me tell you something about heavyweight. First of all, he did say if you're doing singles, doubles, or triples, let's say on the bench press, he's right, because it's too much tension, no fatigue. However, if you get into 6 to 8 reps, 6 to 10 repetition maximum, heavyweight, number one, raises the fatigue level faster. Number two, it raises it higher than light weights. And number three, it keeps it up there longer than light weights. So yes, 6 to 12 reps, even 6 to 10 reps. I like 6 to 10 reps, right? That's as heavy as you can go for those reps with a short rest. You will grow beyond your belief as a natural bodybuilder. Let's talk about time and attention. It's the biggest bullshit word I ever heard in my life. There's no such thing in any exercise science books. It was invented by some bodybuilder. It's a crock of shit. There's only 2 things you need: heavy weight and short rest between sets. Time and attention. That's like omega-3s, another bullshit word. Omega-3s are just a trendy word for the 3 essential fatty acids: linoleic, linolenic, and oleic. They're found in nuts, in salmon, avocado, but somebody had to put a trendy word on there. Time and attention, I don't care if you do 50, 60, 80, 90 seconds. It ain't gonna make a difference. Because if you could do that long, the weight's too light. Forget it, guys. Don't believe it. Now, Greg did 90 minutes of cardio on salmon, chicken, and spinach. A 0 carbohydrates, like he says. The natural guy's going to crash and burn. You can't do it, man. You can't. Let me tell you how different they are from us. In the gym, there was a guy who says he's going to enter the Mr. Florida contest. Florida contest was 6 weeks away. And he was fat. I didn't even see any muscle on him. He was fat. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I let him go, right? 6 weeks later, the contest is here. I go backstage to talk to a couple of competitors, friends of mine. He walks by and says, "Hey, Wayne, how you doing?" I looked at him. I didn't even know it was him. He was completely shredded, ripped. Does that sound natural to you? Does that sound like they're the same as us? They're not. They're different, guys. They really are. Okay. Now, this really bothered me. Greg Doucette says, it's a complicated thing. You're not smart enough. No, he didn't say you're not smart enough. He says you can't understand it. It's like trying to explain an algebraic equation when you can't even add 5 and 5. That's an insult to my intelligence, because I do understand it. And I think it's an insult to yours too. You know why? Because I know a lot of you guys are lawyers and maybe chemical engineers or stockbrokers that are watching this. Because you want to train, you want to get big too, like all the rest of us. It's an insult. Don't let anybody insult you, ever. Because I know you're smart enough to understand it, and I hope you understood this. Now, to Greg's credit, December 29th, 2019, he did a video. It was the best one he ever did. He looked at the camera and he says, don't let any steroid bodybuilder intimidate you. Go into the gym and compete with them. You show them that you're not afraid to compete with them. You go out there and do the best you could as a natural, train as hard as you could, and compete with them. That's the message you got to send. That's the message. And I do give him a lot of credit for that. And I give him all the credit in the world for letting people know that he's on steroids. He has clients that have a right to know. And so do you. So do you. Because the training and eating for a steroid bodybuilder is different from the training and eating for a natural person. It's not that I don't like Greg Doucette. I do. He's a funny guy. He's got his master's degree in kinesiology. I just think that he talks so much and so fast that he doesn't think before he talks, and he ends up saying inaccurate stuff. But I believe he's an honest guy. I do believe that he's been on steroids so long that he forgot what it's like to be natural. And he believes that what he does now, as much training as he does and as hard as he trains, he could have done when he was natural, and he can't. He can't. But let's move on. I want to talk about Jeff Cavaliere. That guy is a fraud. He's a bullshitter. He's got 1,000 videos. It seems like he makes up stuff as he goes along. Okay, I'll give you an example. He's got a video on building muscle with isometrics. That's impossible. It's not going to happen, right? Isometrics, you know, where you just hold, no joint angle change, no lengthening or shortening of the muscle. It's not going to happen. But according to Jeff, it does. And he gives you some bullshit reason why. Isometrics are made to be held for 5 or 6 seconds. And there's a good reason for that. But Jeff doesn't listen to the experts. He says anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds, you hold the isometrics. Okay, and that tension will build muscle. Well, let me tell you something. A friend of mine did that. He listened to him. And you know what happened? He ended up with something called subventricular tachycardia. What the jackass Jeff Cavaliere doesn't tell you is that as you're holding, your blood pressure rises. And as your blood pressure rises, so does your heart rate rise. Well, my buddy did it, felt a pop in his heart, and then he couldn't bring his heart rate down. It was over 200. He rushed himself to the hospital. Took them a while, but through medication, they brought his heart rate down. Now this guy's on blood pressure medicine called a beta blocker, which artificially slows your heart rate down. He's got to be on it for life. Because if he goes off that medication, his heart rate's going to go up again. Why? Because Jeff Cavaliere had to invent something. He had to be a pioneer and go against what the real experts think. He's a fraud. Don't listen to him. Now there's Jeff Nippert. I like Jeff Nippert. He's very, very smart. I agree with most of the stuff he says. Jeff's problem is that he's too nice a guy. He's always got this research by Schoenfeld or whoever else he's, you know, talking about. And he was talking about doing heavy eccentric contractions through a whole workout. And, you know, he's giving all the research done by Schoenfeld and metabolic damage and the heavy weight you can use and all this garbage, right? And I think he knows it's bullshit, okay? Because he, instead of just coming out and saying it, he dances around it, you know? And he says, well, while it might be fun to do, you know, a workout using only eccentric contractions, heavy, I'm not really sure if, you know, if it's totally, you know, the way to do things. And, you know, just come out and say it, Jeff. Just come out and say it. It's bullshit, right? There's only one last thing I want to talk about. Fat percentage. Keep your fat percentage as low as possible. If a guy walks into a gym, he's 10% fat, and another guy walks into a gym, he's 20% fat, the guy's 10% will grow a lot faster, because fat molecules, and we have millions of them, if they're large, because the guy's 20%, they're going to interfere with the contraction. They get in between the fibers, and it acts as friction, like a brake between the contraction and extension. It's not efficient. The 10% guy, it's smooth, like a well-oiled machine. You understand? I'll have no problem. Because they're so small, they won't interfere with the contraction. That's what you want to do, guys. Keep it as low as possible, and you'll grow better than you ever did. How do you lean out? And by the way, natural bodybuilders should always think in terms of getting lean, not getting ripped and sliced and cut. Lean, okay? There's a difference. So, how do you get lean? Cardio. Cardio and weights, of course. But remember, when something goes up, something else has to come down. If you're going to do as much cardio as you need to get lean, which is at least a 90-minute workout, as often as you possibly can, 5-6 days a week, at a moderate intensity, like 70% of your heart rate max, which is 220 minus your age times 70%. That heart rate there is probably pretty good for fat reduction. So remember, if all that cardio, if you're doing all that cardio, you have to ease up a little bit on that weight training. You try to do both at the same time real hard, you're going to burn out. So lessen the sets, maybe lessen the weight a little bit. Don't train to failure every set. You're not going to cut it, because doing all that cardio can drain you. Why do you do all that cardio? Respiratory exchange ratio. That means that in a laboratory, the experts have determined, the exercise science experts, that the higher the intensity, the more glycogen, carbohydrate you use, blood sugar, and less fat. The lower the intensity and the longer the duration, the more fat you use as a fuel. For instance, if you did 30 minutes of high intensity cardio, at the end of 30 minutes, probably 80-85% of that fuel you used, or more, 90%, came from carbohydrate, no fat. Now, when you reverse that, and you do a lower intensity, let's say 70%, first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you're probably using 50-50. 50% glycogen, 50% adipose tissue, and intramuscular fats. As it starts to get into 45 minutes and 60 minutes, it starts to climb more towards fat as a fuel. By the time you're done with 90 minutes, 80-90% of the fuel you'll use will come from fat. Adipose tissue is the fat on the outside of your muscle. Intramuscular fat is in between the muscle. Those, that fuel, that fat as a fuel is what you want to burn. So get into your cardio if you want to lean out. Long duration, high frequency, low intensity. Now, I'm not in the best of shape as far as muscle goes right now, because I do a lot of cardio. I hit the bag, jump rope, I run, and I lift weights. In my 20s, I was a very, very good bodybuilder, natural bodybuilder. I trained with Mr. Eastern America, Eddie Saddleberger. I trained with Mr. New Jersey, Butch Pellegrino. They were both phenomenal. They were both enhanced. But I held my own with them, and I'm very proud of that. At 67 years old, guys, not much testosterone. This is what you wind up with. I think that's it. Listen, I hope you learned something. I'm not a YouTube guy. This is the first exercise video I've ever done. I'm not looking for likes. I'm not looking for subscribers. I'm not in this for the money. I just want to help you, because I know how I was years ago, and I don't want that to happen to you. So eat good, train hard, and remember, God's on your side.